Hello and welcome. My name is Alan Odette. I'm the CEO of the Ontario Medical Association. Pleased to open this fireside chat on the important topic of the future of digital health. The pandemic has, without question, disrupted all of our lives, many aspects of health and health delivery, perhaps none as transformative or accelerated as digital health. This afternoon, we're joined by Mr. Paul Hudson. He's the CEO of Sanofi. He has a career that spanned globally. I'd like to say to Mr. Hudson and his colleagues at Sanofi, thank you so much for investing in your vaccine plant here in Toronto. We're grateful that you've decided to expand your long history in Ontario, and we're excited to ensure that we have a secure supply chain of vaccines in our future. Paul's leading the execution of Sanofi's Play to Win strategy. It's a 5-year plan designed with the ambition to leverage breakthrough science to change the practice of medicine. And so today's chat will be led by Jeff Steiner. He's the President and Executive Director of Angel Investors Ontario. And with that, I thank you all for your participation today and look forward, Jeff, to your discussion with Paul.
Well, good afternoon. As the program notes, my name is Jeffrey Steiner. I'm a member of the board of the Toronto Global Forum and also the president of Angel Investors Ontario. It's my privilege and honor to do an interview today with the global CEO of Sanofi, Dr. Paul Hudson. He's joining us, obviously. Sanofi is one of the major pharmaceutical companies, a global company headquartered in France with operations around the world. And in this pharmaceutical healthcare sector, with what the world has been going through, I think we're going to find this to be a very interesting conversation. Dr. Hudson, welcome. It's very good to see you, and thank you for participating.
Jeff, thanks so much for inviting me. And I should say from the off that I'm an honorary doctorate, so I'm not going to take any praise where I don't deserve it from my old alma mater, but mainly for work done in healthcare, which I'm very proud that I've done, and teams I've led, and very excited to be chatting to you today.
Well, we are going to talk about R&D and doctors and innovation. Behind me on the screen is my invention of a new vaccine that I wrote on this whiteboard here. So you're telling me with your honorary doctorate, you can't understand it. I can't understand it. And I don't think anybody seeing it can do that either. But we're welcoming you. You're relatively recent as the CEO of Sanofi, and your timing is quite impeccable. If I understand it, you joined as Sanofi's CEO literally just a couple months before the global pandemic. And so I'm going to maybe start out with a bit of a discussion on what's it like to manage a global international operations company during a once every 100 years, hopefully, pandemic. And then secondly, particularly for a CEO in the healthcare, pharmaceutical field, what's that been like?
Well, great question. So I think to start at the beginning, I joined in the September of 2019 and got a strategy developed with the team, laid it out to the capital markets, felt emboldened about the work we could do in healthcare and the lives we could impact positively. And then pretty much immediately we went into a pandemic, as tragic as it is. And that was in the sort of Jan, Feb, March time. And that changed everything for everybody, right? And sort of we know that. Now, as a new CEO, you have these brilliant plans that you're going to have a strategy, then you're going to be around the world and communicating and listening. And overnight, I was at my kitchen table on Zoom. I wasn't flying into Shanghai or any of these capitals or major cities. And, we're trying to introduce myself to the team in Brazil by Zoom. And I'm, trying to get reviews done of businesses and understand how to execute strategy. And you have all that, which I think most CEOs or new CEOs were trying to come to terms with the fact that we went virtual immediately, and for good reason, of course. But then we roll on top of that the fact that we're a healthcare company. And on top of that, we're a vaccine company. So we worked tirelessly, literally night and day for over a year to make sure medicines could get to patients, in cardiovascular disease and diabetes and oncology, in multiple sclerosis, that they just would not have been able to get if we didn't keep our factories working. And we quarantined manufacturing teams, and we socially distanced, temperature checked, tested. We did everything we could to make sure that no patient went without who had a chronic illness, because that was first and foremost. And then, of course, on top of that, we pushed forward a vaccine for COVID-19 too, in fact, and offered to help others make theirs, because it's what we should do if we're purpose-driven. So quite a ride. And while it's been a challenge, having everybody, trying a new way of working when you're a new CEO is not a bad thing, because people sort of let go of some of the old routines, and we're very open and accountable. Meeting sizes got smaller. People accepted actions faster, because the bigger issue was getting the world back to normal. And I've said all the way through it that I hope we keep some of those working practices, because we're seeing it already, by the way, that we are, as people slowly return, that we want people to be remote and do whatever to contribute, but we want to come together to collaborate and to take care of each other and to innovate. And, they're the exciting things about what's been happening. But, I guess finally, I couldn't be more proud of a company that's tried to navigate the pandemic in healthcare and play our part. I said a few times, we're purpose-driven. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And this company has responded magnificently, and I've perhaps never been as proud as at any point before in my career.
Well, that's terrific to hear, and just for our audience to understand the scope and scale of Sanofi. If I'm not mistaken, you have some 10,000 people working in the vaccine sector of your pharma company alone. Is that right?
Yeah, we're about 100,000 people worldwide, and about 10,000 just in manufacturing in and around vaccines, and then up to 5,000 more people involved in bringing them through, working on clinical programs, making sure that they're at the right safety, efficacy, quality levels. We take that work very seriously, of course, as you'd expect. We have a big team, and right throughout, while else was still going on, we were still making flu vaccine. And there was more requests for our flu vaccine last year than ever in the company's 100-year plus history. So, and the same again this year, by the way. And we must do it, because as people are starting to realize that it's a good investment, vaccines, for population health and to keep societies moving. And of course, in the case of COVID, people are starting to understand the health economic trade-off when workforces can't do what they want to do. And so, we got an amazingly dedicated team, and many of them have not had a single complete day off since the beginning of the crisis.
Well, as someone who's luckily healthy so far through this pandemic and have the 2 vaccinations, let me also thank you and your team for keeping up that pace, and all of our first responders and medical people who are the users and the distributors of these vital products. Paul, when you started, you had put together a plan, a 5-year plan. I think it was called Play to Win. How was that hindered, or was there any acceleration in your 5-year plan, or did COVID kind of knock off your plan completely and it was on to a whole new day? Could you tell us just a little bit about the 5-year plan and the areas of hindrance and acceleration?
So, first up, we named our strategy Play to Win, and really on the and changing the practice of medicine. And we've got an incredible history in the company. We've got amazing raw ingredients in science and people and just thinking. We found that we were sort of pushing on in areas like cardiovascular and diabetes, but really we were not going to be the first in a disease, or perhaps even the best in a disease. And that play to win strategy was saying, let's pick the areas we think we can transform the practice of medicine. Let's be absolutely obsessed with delivering that. And we called it play to win because it really is about that, right? And if we fail in the pursuit of changing the practice of medicine, then it was a noble pursuit. And if we fail at just trying to be fifth to market in a market that hasn't an unmet need, then we have to ask ourselves, did we deploy our resources for the greatest good possible? So in the pandemic, actually, we were perhaps enabled because, I said earlier, we had more agile teams, meeting high frequency, smaller groups, getting to accountability, helping us obsessive about that. And then, of course, we added some things that were there when we developed the strategy at the end of 19. We said we want to play our part. We're a vaccine company. So we started 2 programs, one mRNA and one recombinant baculovirus. You don't need to understand the differences, but a lot of people are becoming sort of expert now, and we should get to that. But at the same time, in what was, I think, the first of its kind, we collaborated with GSK and signed a deal to bring one of these vaccines forward for COVID. And at the same time, we took on the work to make vaccines for Moderna, for BioNTech, and for J&J, because they were the only 3 vaccines at the time that were approved in Europe and the US. And we knew that if we helped them create more volumes, then that helps the rest of the world simultaneously. So we're playing to win. I mean, we're prioritizing, we're focused on the things that matter most. And, in 2017, 67% of our pipeline was first or best. And in 2021, it's 89%. And we've managed to do that because we've increased it by 1/3. And we've done it knowing that somebody's life somewhere will get better because of the choices we made. And that is really what, gets us all jazzed and is the right thing to do. So no, play to win is about not settling, not being average, about going for, the bold goals to improve human life. And I would say, if anything, given the nature of the pandemic and its tragic impact, it's emboldened us all to be even more obsessed with doing that, and delighted the way the company has stepped up.
Well, let's chat a little bit about innovation within that plan, or at least in the future and near future. Your views, the outlook on innovation in the pharma sector, in general, but particularly Sanofi and your plan. I ask this because today, in this interview, we have a number of tech startups that have joined us, that are watching and participating as part of Angel Investors Ontario, the organization I'm involved in, and also Synergy Labs, which is here in the Toronto-Durham region. They have a cohort of Brazilian wellness and healthcare and other companies, and they would want me to ask you about digitization. Let's talk about that first in innovation, particularly in the pharma sector. We don't always think about computers, et cetera, in pharma, but how is digitization or digital transformation going on in your sector and in Sanofi, and what would be some of the opportunities for some of these smaller startups?
I think we realize a lot of things when you've been around a little while. And one is that, you have no right to be the only place where innovation happens. And I think with the processing power on a scientist or data scientist laptop in a Starbucks on free Wi-Fi, can probably search for as many molecules as a 500-person lab 20 years ago. And, we just have to accept that our impact on the exponential ability to search and find new targets for new medicines is just exponentially different than it's ever been, powered by data. And, when you come in as a new CEO, you're looking for places where you can disrupt yourselves, because it's so important to accelerate the journey of the company. And of course, we're all becoming much more digitally native in our pursuit. When I was starting out, I would go to a retail store on a high street to book a flight. And I would stand in line, and somebody helpful behind a monitor would tell me if I needed to book now and pay now. And it was all, but it was a journey. It was like you'd book a few hours out your day to go and book a flight. Now I would do it on kayak, while I'm in a taxi. And you know, I think we have to accept that it's not just the consumer world and our own world. It's everything from identifying drug targets, identifying pathways and diseases, using digitized images from scans of tumors, overlaying it with biomarker data, overlaying it with phenotypic or genotypic data, and looking at it and saying, is there a trend or a theme or something that would turn us towards perhaps a solution to a disease that we could never have discovered one by one in a lab? So I see the data side of things positively disrupting us, in fact, enabling our people to maximum impact, to leverage all that data and to let some of the machine learning and AI and automation power us to do that. And it doesn't stop there. You know, we were recognized last year at the beginning of last year to have the most high-tech manufacturing site in the world in our industry. And, you know, we, to put it simply, we use data and digital to release batches faster than we could have done before. Before, it would be thousands of pieces of paper, all signed, dated, and stamped, and it could take 3 weeks after a batch comes off a line to get it approved because, rightly, regulatory standards. At our one site in Framingham, Massachusetts, we take 760 million data points a day. So when we approve it and we can get to releasing that batch within a day or less, it's because we have more data than we ever had manually to do a much more sophisticated job much faster. And so everywhere we're touched, whether it's the number of doctors in Italy, Russia, the US, that switched entirely to relying on us on virtual platforms during the pandemic, because of course they weren't in their office or we couldn't go to their office. You know, it's incredible. And if I have something to say to the small startups, you are never too small. And I think Sanofi is way open for business and to be inclusive in that context. We have a small company we've been working with called Ailey Labs, who was a company, I think, of 4 people when we started working with them. They're bigger now, on digitizing our entire financial data and then putting AI on top to allow us to make better decisions, to give us flexibility to invest more in research and development, because in the end, that's what we're about. And we've done that at speed with a company that is quite tiny, less now. And you should never fear, as a small startup in whatever field it is, particularly with us, that we can't flex some muscles to allow to partner to your infrastructure size, right? Nobody wants to sort of drown in a big pharma or big organization in general. I think we're demonstrating, whether it's data, in that case, AD Labs, whether it's the recent acquisition of Cadmon, which I think should be closed any day, depending on when we're showing this, that we are brilliant at working with those that are at the head of the pack or leading the charge in their areas, because we think we want to jump forward with them. We have no monopoly on innovation. We have a lot of expertise, and we love to see these small startups grow, because they grow, we grow with them. They reverse impact our culture and have great business and scientific impact. So, yeah, no, it's. I would say to you, as you said, your extended group that you represent, that we're a super cool company to consider partnering with because of that, because we're open and we don't claim to have all the answers. And I don't think anybody can really claim that they do anymore.
But it's terrific, Paul, to hear that, you know, the collaboration you do is not just with the other big pharma. You talked earlier about, you know, collaborating for production, but as part of the ecosystem, you do engage with, and your people engage with the biotech sector and startups and others. And people shouldn't be afraid to approach Sanofi if they have solutions, whether it's digital or other biotech solutions. That's what I'm hearing from you, and that's to me very encouraging.
Yeah, and you are hearing it. You're hearing it well, because, you know, I think the small companies or startups, they think that they have to be all polished and with an office and everything else. And, you know, again, we now have such a large collection of examples of, you know, 3 people, 3 laptops, and a WeWork. And suddenly they're helping us transform fundamental parts of our business, and it's welcomed. Hey, you have to help with the change management. Yes, we have to be open-minded, and perhaps we don't always get it right, but I'm seeing more successes than anything else at the moment, and that gives me a lot of confidence that we're staying very relevant and also staying very connected to what the future looks like.
Well, that's terrific. I mean, that's the great news, not just for our Brazilian startups that work with us in Synergy Labs, but the ecosystem around the world to have a company that's so receptive to partnering and for innovation. And, Paul, we talked a lot in this discussion about the pandemic and the challenge both for you as a CEO, for your company, for the world. The other challenge, of course, is climate change. And I'm wondering, for Sanofi, under your plan, what are the aspects, what are the roles and programs and activities that you're doing as part of your plan to address climate change, particularly in the operations, et cetera, that you have around the world?
Well, we set an incredibly high bar. Out of all the work that we've done as a company since I arrived, and before, I'm sure, our most complicated piece of work was on climate and corporate social responsibility. And it shouldn't be complicated, but let me tell you why it was. It was complicated because we only wanted to do things that we thought it was incumbent upon us that we must do. And that if we don't do them, there is a chance other people will not do them. And that we could not have as a consequence. So, of course, the only people that can convert all of your manufacturing sites to renewable energy is us. It's only us. Nobody else is going to do that job for us. Got to do that. Nobody else can cure sleeping sickness in unserved parts of the world because we're the experts. And if we don't do it, there is nobody behind us to step up and do it. Nobody else, from what we can see, is stepping forward in pediatric cancers and saying, yes, of course, there is not a business case for developing, but we're worth more than that. We are purpose-driven. So how can we push forward an agenda to research difficult to treat pediatric cancers? And then, of course, we're going to supply 30 or 40 of the world's most essential medicines to 30 or 40 of the world's most challenged countries, not to make a profit, just because it's the right thing to do. And we ask ourselves each time, why us? Why now? What are we going to do? And if we don't do it, would anybody do it? And, that's why it was our most complicated piece of work, but it's perhaps going to be our most proud piece of work because we know the whole company is pressing, not a small group, dedicated, printing the poster with our objectives and sticking it on the wall by the elevator. This is everybody all in. That's very different. We've committed by 2027 to take all of the plastic out of our vaccine packaging. That's not easy because we're heavily regulated, because the FDA and the Canadian authorities and the European authorities don't want you to change things very quickly because, of course, they care about regulation and standards. And so we have to go on this long journey to do this really well, because if we don't, nobody will. And, to that end, and we haven't touched on it, maybe we'll get to, but we've just announced last year that with partnership with the Canadian government, we're building a new state-of-the-art vaccine manufacturing facility in the Greater Toronto area. And we're doing it there because we think there is a commitment to corporate social responsibility. There is a commitment from the Canadian government. There is expertise and skills, and we're known in the area and we have a heartbeat in the area, and that we think we can set new standards in high dose flu. And, we can talk about that if you like, but, we're all in the Canadian ecosystem. And that's very, very important for us, but to do it the right way, which is why our commitment to the environment and carbon neutrality and net zero. You're seeing it with COP26. There's a lot of conversations. But I look at it, I read it, I was invited to it, and I just think, are we doing everything we can and more? And if the answer is yes, okay, let's go and be serious about it. And that's what's happening.
Well, I can tell you, listening to you, if there's any young people starting a career in the pharma sector, this interview with you would be one of the best recruiting things, because Sanofi is obviously well-led and has great ethical and moral principles. So I wish you well, particularly, and of course, with the new facilities in the Toronto area. I'm going to ask you now, Paul, probably the toughest question that you're going to get at the Toronto Global Forum, and that is, with your Manchester background, having been schooled there, my last question really would be, Are you Manchester United or Manchester City? Where you stack up there?
Jeff, you've been doing so well up to that point, and you just let it slip there. So just to remind everybody, we're open to work with biotechs. We're open to work with startups in data and digital. We're modern, and thank you for the compliments on the advertisement for come work with us, because we're diverse and inclusive. We're not perfect, right? But we're on that journey, and we believe that we will be a company that reflects society. That is our absolute overriding obsession. And so yeah, come join us, make us be better, right? Make us be better and trust us with all or part of your career, because we know that's precious to you. And then, of course, Jeff, we come to your killer question right at the end, which is City or United? I've been following United since the early 70s. I was born in the area, studied in the area later in my career. And nobody ever used to ask the question because City never achieved much. But now everybody asks. I'm a Red. I will always be a Red. Good days and bad. I will always be a Red. But thank you for asking. Well,
commitment and loyalty is obviously also a part of your makeup. Well, Paul, that's all the time we have. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause, virtual as it may be. But thank you very much, Paul Hudson, Global CEO of Sanofi, for participating in the Toronto Global Forum, to be so encouraging to startups and the ecosystem, and for all that you and your team around the world have done to help fight this pandemic and to prepare the world for a better future. Thank you very much for participating, and thank you, audience, for listening and engaging with us here at the Toronto Global Forum.